Arika Pierce is a law-educated corporate VP turned author, leadership coach, entrepreneur, and keynote speaker. She uses her knowledge, skills, and experience to help organizations and individuals make and become better leaders. And I love that mission. Arika's journey is just so inspiring, coming from a corporate top-level management career and leaping into entrepreneurship. In this episode, we dig into her story, how she found her way both into writing as well as coaching. You'll also hear about how mindset and mantras are such a key to her unlocking her potential and becoming who she is here today. So let's go ahead and get right on into it. Welcome to the Meaning Movement podcast. We know you want to build a stress-free life and business that gives you the financial freedom and lifestyle that you want. In order to do that, you have to eliminate the conflict between your work and the rest of your life. But the problem is running a business is hard and requires sacrifice and commitment, leaving you feeling depleted, exhausted, and even burned out. But we believe that every entrepreneur deserves to recapture the motivation and energy they need to run their business. And that is what this show is all about. I'm your host, Dan Cumberland. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button wherever you are listening, and let's go. Arika, thank you so much for joining me. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dan. I am excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. The question I always like to begin with is, how do you begin to talk about the work that you do?
Wow. Okay. Good question. So, I think on its face, a lot of people would say, "Oh, you're a career coach, right? You come in, you help people maybe with their resume, interview skills, things of that nature." But that's not quite how I would describe what I do. I'm really looking to help people who are, in the middle of their career get to the next level. And that could mean a lot of different things. And a part of that could be preparing for a leap to change jobs, or to change their career path. But to me, it's really about elevating themselves, building out their confidence, taking those career risks and doing those fear experiments, having someone that can push them along the way. So, career coach kind of sounds, I think, a little bit too simplistic for some things that I'm focused on.
I love that. I love some of, I don't know, maybe I'm projecting my experience onto you. But like people always often ask if I'm a life coach, career coach, because of the work that I do. And I was like, no, I'm definitely not that.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, I kind of am, but I'm definitely not that. Do you have a similar reaction?
No, absolutely. And I think some people have personalities, right? Where, we just can't help it, right? If we hear, that if someone's going through something, we immediately want to help them navigate it. So I think
absolutely.
That's why being labeled quickly a career coach, life coach is easy, but it's like, no, I can't. I could probably do it, but that's not exactly.
It's more interesting. That's what I was going to say. It's much more interesting than that.
Yes, absolutely.
I love it. Well, I'd like to just kind of rewind the story a little bit and just ask, how did you get into this? What brought you here?
Oh, wow. So, really what brought me to the work that I do now is when I was probably, fairly early in my career, but not just, right out of college or anything like that. My career just really started to, fast track. And I was promoted to a vice president position before I was 30. And when it happened, when I got the promotion, while I was excited, I definitely was like, oh my God, how do I make sure I don't fail at this? And so as a result, that really started me to learn more just about both professional development and personal development. And I really started to go very deep into other people who were focused on leadership, John Maxwell's, who I discovered at that time, and other people who really talked about how do you really position yourself, as a leader? How do you become someone who has influence, who people want to, listen to, who people want to follow, who they trust, all of those things. And so as a result, I really just spent a lot of my career, of course, doing my day-to-day job, but really also focused on developing myself. And so a time came where I decided to write a book that was focused on all of my advice that I would give to people. It was called The Millennials Playbook to Adulting.
I
And
love
so
it.
from there, I started to really realize that there was opportunities to transition out of my corporate career to focus full time on helping other people who really need that push to get outside their comfort zone, to think about how they approach their career and taking control of their career in a different way. And that's how it all happened. And if you had asked me a few years ago, oh, will this be what you do full time? Never. I would have never ever
Yeah, wouldn't
thought so.
imagined it.
But that
Yeah.
also helps me in my own business because it helps me show people that, what you commit to your first, 5, 10 years of your career doesn't have to be your story forever.
That is such a good point, and I feel like it's. I mean, out of all the podcast interviews, we've just at the time of recording this, just passed 100 shows.
Wow.
All the interviews that we've done along the way, so few people that I talked to actually knew from early on what they wanted to do with their lives. So few of them even went to school for where
Mhm.
they ended up, and so it's just I think it's I mean, but still that myth of I don't know if that the myth is the right word, but just that idea that like you've got to have it all figured out, you got to choose your one thing and commit forever. It just like has such strength. It like has like this gravitational pull that everyone, even as we're doing it, as we're seeing other people doing it, we still feel like we've got to have it figured out and have to choose and have to stay the course no matter what.
That's so true. It's funny. I have an intern working with me this summer, and I can see in her mind that because she doesn't know what she wants to do next, it's almost stifling her growth a little bit, right?
Yeah.
We can sit in that analysis paralysis because we're like, I don't know if I should, if I still want to stay in this job or if I want to stay with this company or if I want to do this. And so as a result of overthinking it, a lot of times action doesn't happen. And
Yes.
sometimes I always tell
Yes.
people, just think about what's that one small step that's going to give you that momentum to keep moving forward. And then you
Mm,
keep going. And,
mm,
sometimes we just have to figure it out along the way. I went to law
yeah.
school, I'm a lawyer by education. And
Yeah.
so, do I use my skill set from law school? Absolutely. But,
Yeah.
I'm don't obviously practice law. And
Yeah.
that's okay. And I'm perfectly okay with that.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. I love that, and I think just that call to not to overthink it, to take action. I think that oftentimes we try to solve these big questions of what am I going to do with my life, which way am I going to go by analysis, which like is really helpful. It's really helpful to be self aware. It's really helpful to know who you are and know your story, but at the same time, you can't solve your future without starting to take action and really should treat it as an iterative process of you take some steps, you learn more about yourself, you learn more about who you are, you learn
Mhm.
more about what you want, and then you use that to decide what the next steps after that are, which I hear you saying with your intern. It's so great that you have that she has someone like you helping her think through those things for herself. Just to kind of rewind a little bit, so just tell me about that. I want to really talk about that transition from VP to being entrepreneur, and you're going out on your own way. But what industry were you in? What Tell me a little bit about that company or like that career.
Sure. So I have always worked for healthcare technology companies, but I always worked in growth and strategy roles. So my job for companies was really to be the person that would take a look at where the company is and think about where we want to be in the next 3 to 5 years, and then creating, that strategic growth plan to get from, A to B. And so what's interesting about that, when you think about the work that I do now, it's actually very similar, right? When I
Yeah,
when I work with either an individual or even when I work with companies, I'm looking at, okay, where are you right now, Dan? And where is it that you want to be? And then let's kind of talk through, let's think through what are those actions, what are those tactics, and let's create that career action plan to help
yeah,
you execute on it. So it's funny how the skills that you may use, in one skill set or in one job, are often very transferable when you kind of, pull back the layers. So,
yeah,
so strategy, I love to strategize and I love to solve problems and I love helping people get from where they are now to where they want to be. And it's literally, when I think about it, it's very similar to the work I did when I was back in my corporate career.
I love it. And I love how it often works out that way, right? That you
Mhm.
don't know it, but you're acquiring these skills along the way to prepare you for your next thing.
Absolutely. And I think the biggest difference now for me is that the work that I do, especially when I'm working with individuals, for me it has a more purpose to it than when I was doing it in my corporate career. And this
Yeah.
isn't a knock, I'm not someone who believes everyone should quit their job and become entrepreneurs, right? That's not
Yes. Yes.
that's not my ministry.
Yes.
But what I would say is that oftentimes we don't move in the right direction because we don't have someone that can, push us and that can move us along. And so
Yeah.
for me, it was great to recognize how I could transfer that out and do it on my own as an entrepreneur.
Yeah. And is that how you think of yourself, as being that kind of push, the person to kind of push people along and help them take those steps they need to take?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think
Yeah.
a lot of times too, it's accountability. I mean, that's why people hire trainers, right, for working
Yeah.
out. That's why people go to
Yeah.
coaches, all of those things. And so a part of, but I can be that push, but really I'm always thinking, I would say I'm strategy first, and then I can help you execute. But at least let's get that strategy down. Let's think
Yeah.
about what your goals are. Let's think about, what are your strengths? What are your passions? What's missing? What does your
Yeah.
network look like? Who do you need to be,
Mm.
interacting with? Let's look at your LinkedIn profile.
Yeah.
It's all of those
Yeah.
components, and literally thinking through how they fit together. How are you showing up every day? How are people experiencing you? Do we need
Yep.
to do something to change that? And so that's how my mind is always, always goes to, how do we kind of make those tweaks, those changes to get you faster to where you want to be next?
I love that. That's really, yeah, really, really, yeah, fantastic. I'm curious. Have you always? So it sounds like a big part of that leap for you from the corporate world to going out on your own, going solo, was the book. And did the book really serve as a? Maybe I'm misinterpreting. So maybe I should ask: was the book a big part of that, or did it? And in what ways?
Yeah. So what happened, Dan, is that I wrote the book, The Millennials Playbook to Adulting, in 2018. And I actually wrote it because people would always just come to me for, advice about career, about, just life after you finish college and you're starting your career, not just how to get a job, but how to keep a job, how to excel at
Yeah.
your job. And so I actually wrote the book more as a creative outlet, because I
Mm.
had a very demanding job. And it was just a way for me to kind of decompress and to kind of pull all of the things that I was like sharing people into one place. And what
Yeah.
happened was really unexpected. Was as a result of doing the book, I started to get these requests to, do workshops, to do trainings, to really do a lot of the professional development that I loved receiving, right, when I was in my
Yes.
career. Now I was being asked to come and actually, teach a training on personal branding, teach a class on, a workshop on this, speak at a conference. And what I realized was, oh, I really like this. And I was like,
Yeah.
when I was a little girl, I wanted to be a teacher. My mom always says. So I was like, maybe
Uh
this is
huh.
how it all is coming into play. And so, so I actually, from 2018 until 2020, I actually just kind of did, it was my side hustle, I guess is what you would call it. I still worked my
Yeah.
corporate job, but on the side I would do workshops, I would do some coaching at that time, and I was, kind of started my business. And so in 2020, sort of in the early months of the pandemic, while I was
Yeah.
sitting at home and no longer traveling and on the move, I decided, you know what, if not now, then when? I'm going to go
Yeah.
all in on this company and really stepping out to build a community where I can help professionals who are looking to advance to that next level, who are looking to further develop their leadership, and who are looking for, all of these things that sometimes we're just not trained on in school or even,
Yeah.
on the job. And
Mm.
so that's kind of how that evolved. And from there, the company really has been growing since the past 2 years,
Yeah.
which then kind of led to my most recent book that just came out as well. So wasn't planned whatsoever.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Well, just to kind of follow up that question. So when you went at that moment of going all in, like it was a scale of, 1 to 10, how scary was that?
uh 10 plus.
11, 12.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
in full transparency, I had decided that I was probably going to leave the corporate role that I was in and go full time in my company. And at that point, probably in the next 2 to 3 years, right? So I was
Yeah.
thinking more like 2023, 2024.
Mm.
I was actually a senior vice president. I reported directly to the CEO. I had about 5 departments reporting up to me. It was a big job. I mean,
Yeah.
it was a lot. And the day that I quit my job, I did not wake up that morning thinking I was going to quit.
Yeah.
It was just the job was, and then with COVID, again, lots of time to think. And that
Yeah.
morning, I said, you know what? I think I'm ready to just go.
Wow.
I think I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
And so I made
Yeah.
3 phone calls. I called Fidelity, which is where my 401k and money
Uh-huh.
was, to see how long term I could sustain myself if
There
I
you
quit
go.
my job that day. I called my mom after that to kind of just do a gut check, like, Mom, what do you think if I, resign today? And
Yeah.
and she said, worst case scenario, you will have to move back home with us, right? And I was
Yeah.
like, that's pretty worst case scenario. So
She was okay with that.
yeah, that's exactly what she told me. I mean, I
So
have a
great.
great
That's
support
so great.
network. And then the third call was to the CEO, who was my boss, and I
Yeah.
told her, the words I said to her is, I said, I think I'm ready to wind down my time here. And it was a
Mm.
Friday, and she said, do you want time over the weekend to think about it? And I said, no, I'm pretty confident.
Wow.
But she said, let's talk Monday, which we did. She asked if I could stay actually about 8 more weeks, which was
Mm.
actually a good thing. I got a few more
Yeah.
paychecks.
There you go.
So,
Yeah. That's great. Great for both parties. And it
yeah,
sounds like, I mean, that's the right way to do it, right?
yeah,
To leave
yeah,
on good terms, maybe leave the door open just in case.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Never
Yeah.
burn
Yeah.
any bridges. A
Yes.
few years
Yes.
ago, I think there was that story where I think it was that flight attendant or someone who quit her job, and she like went off
Yes.
the slide
Yeah.
and stuff. And it was like, no, don't do that.
No,
Don't.
don't do that. That's a good way to get into a lot of trouble. Financially, so I hear you say, you called Fidelity, make sure you have your investments there. Did you have income that was there a bridge in place or any other, like, did you already have that business kind of up and going a little bit to
Yeah.
know that you could sustain yourself a bit?
So, I had been doing workshops, right, and
Yeah.
different
Yeah.
speaking engagements, and I had a couple of people who I was kind of coaching, but I mean, it wasn't anything compared to, a full time income.
Yeah.
And I'll say this to people whenever someone does come and they ask me about advice. About staying in their corporate career and or moving into full time entrepreneurship. You definitely want to have a safety net. I do believe that. And
Yeah.
you want to make
Yeah.
sure that, and I think you have to have the mindset, right? You can't have
Yeah.
that scarcity mindset of, oh my
Mm.
God, I'm broke. I'm not going to make money. That's one thing
Yep.
I will say.
Mm.
Even in times where I'm a little bit have been panicked, I know like I'm going to find a way. And I will say that when you do go into full-time entrepreneurship, when you're all in and like, whether or not you eat, it depends on like,
Yeah.
what you sell and who you connect with and all those things. It's a different ball game versus when you're doing it on the side. And
Yes.
so that's just, everybody's different. But for
Yeah.
me, probably if I had just kept doing it on the side, the timeline for when I left would have gotten like another year, another year. So
Sure.
for me
Yeah.
personally, it was a leap that I felt, okay, if I'm going to really
Yeah.
build this to be a scalable company, I got to
Hmm.
just completely go
Now
in
do it.
and do it. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. For folks that are listening, and I think you could speak to this both from your expertise working with people around these very questions, as well as from your own story. For people who are listening and you know, they're maybe in a space where you were, where they're like, I know that, like, in the next few years, let's 3, 4, 5 years, whatever, how should they think about when they're ready, or when, and maybe the answer shouldn't be, or the question shouldn't be ready, but when to make that leap? Let's put it that way, whether or not they feel ready, because some people will never feel ready, but how do you know it's time?
So I actually I give a talk called Ready is a Lie. And
Yes.
I
Oh,
fully
that's so good.
believe that, ready is an arbitrary goal that
Mm.
will never, ever feel
Yeah.
attainable, right? So you have to start before you're ready. You have to
Yeah.
take that leap. There's a great book called Fear is My Homeboy by Judy Holler. And I fully subscribe to, start doing things that make you a little bit afraid, because that will exercise the muscle of fear and courage. And so it makes doing those really big, scary things, it makes it a little bit easier. So if you, if,
Yes.
if you, for example, you want to take that leap, well, what's something that could be, a small step that will get you closer, but still feels scary,
Mm.
right? So
Mm.
maybe a
Hmm.
part of it is just for some people, just setting up the LLC feels scary because it's like, oh my God,
Yeah.
it's real now, and or I'm going to spend the money to set up an LLC, right? People,
Yes. Yes.
whenever people tell me, I was talking to someone recently, they were like, well, I got to do an LLC, and I'm like, it's the simplest process, right? Like it's just,
It's not that
it's not.
bad.
But to some people, that makes
Yeah.
it feel real, and that's
Hmm.
what makes it feel scary.
Mm.
So
Mm.
start making a list of those things that would get you closer, and start crossing them off. And then
That's so
that is
good.
when you will start to feel like, okay, I'm moving in that direction. But
Yes.
the idea of ever feeling ready or being, there's never a great time to quit your job unless you've won the lottery. I assume that
Yeah.
might not even be the right time, or there's never a
Yeah.
great time to apply for that, promotion,
Mm.
unless you're a shoe in for it, right? I mean, there's all these
Yes.
things that you can come up with that could be blockers, but you've got to just at least, you could push yourself, and
Yeah.
see what happens. And even if you fail forward. Nobody
Mm.
gets a success without failure. So welcome
Yeah.
those failures and just keep moving forward.
That is such good advice, and it feels like it kind of circles all the way back to where we started about like just taking action, and that
Yeah.
by taking that first step, and that first step isn't necessarily quitting your job, right? But that first step towards your fear, you find that like it's easier to take the next step, and then the next step, and the next step, and then pretty soon you're running, right? You're pretty soon you're actually moving.
Absolutely. When I wrote my first book, what I now realize was that was sort of my way of kind of testing of, okay, I have a lot to say and share, but unless people
Yeah.
ask me for it, I don't really, provide this information just to the,
Uh-huh.
general public.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I realized even in writing a book that is kind of a, nonfiction professional development book, it's a little scary because you're now having people to come in and say, well, that's not how I would do it, or that's not how
Mm-hmm.
I would say it.
Mm-hmm.
So it was actually some of my first steps to really putting myself out there. And I remember my editor said when she did my first edit, she said, you say in your book, I think too much. I think this. I
Mm.
think you should do this. She's like, if someone picked
Yeah.
up your book, they don't want they picked it up because they want to know what you think. So you don't have to
Yes.
keep telling them, I think.
Yes.
Just own what you're saying. So,
Well, that's good. That's
those
great
are things we
feedback.
have to work on.
I love it. I love it. Well, and I think that yeah, just thinking about that action step, the fear, like you were saying, like the fear piece. I think that it's so important to like to note that like our fear often is more painful than the thing that we fear. Like we make it feel so big and scary, and then when we actually get there, it's not that bad. And so to actually, like you're saying, like break down your fears, make your list, and then just start taking, knocking them out one at a time is just I think a really helpful process. So yeah, it's really good. I'm curious about just about your writing. Like, have you always thought of yourself as a writer?
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
I think that is certainly where going to law school does come in handy
Oh, I
because you
bet.
do a lot of writing in law school.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think, writing is something like many things. The more you do it, the better you get at it.
Yeah.
And now I really enjoy writing. I wish I had more time to do it, but it's really cathartic, and I think it's a great outlet for me.
Yeah. That's great. That's great. Well, I have not had a chance to get a hold of your new book yet, but you know, I'd love to hear a little bit about it and hear, I guess the argument, the story, the journey that you take readers on in that book.
Yeah, and we'll have to make sure you get a copy of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's called "I Can, I Will, Watch Me: How to Not Be Overlooked, Underpaid, or Undervalued." And the title is my personal mantra.
Mm.
It's a mantra that I have used for many years. If you, were to come to my home, you would see it's like on post-it notes in my bathroom, on my computer,
I love
like
it.
everywhere, stuck inside different things like I can, I will, watch me. And,
Yeah.
it's just something that I wanted to share because I think having a personal mantra that pushes you in those times where you doubt yourself,
Mm.
or when you're holding yourself back, or when you're letting fear, get in the way. It's important to have something that you can, say to yourself that's going to remind you to remove those blocks. But the
Mm.
book in itself is really a roadmap, on how to, really build that strategy around your career. So again, going back to my background, it was, working with companies in strategy and growth. What I know is that for individuals, being ambitious is not enough to really move your career forward. You have to also be very strategic. And I think a lot of times, some people subscribe to that notion of, I'm just going to keep my head down and work really hard. And I'm sure,
Yeah.
great things are going to happen. Or you have people who are just drifting, in their career without any idea of where to go next. And, what I find is people will spend more time planning a vacation than they will planning out their career.
That is
So,
so true.
so this book is really, it's meant to be a roadmap, but it's also very actionable and tactical, where
Mm.
it's really helping you think about, okay, when someone says I'm overlooked, all right, let's dig deeper into that. Who are the people who need to, know who you are? What is it that they need to know about you? And really creating, again, that plan around that. If you want to be
Yeah.
promoted, or get a raise or change jobs, okay, where do you want to be next? What does that action plan look like? What's that timeline look like?
Yeah.
So it's really, kind of forces you, if you take it seriously in the book, there's lots of action assignments to really go on this journey of mapping out all of these things that really will help you have that more strategic, insight to execute on what's next for you as far as your career journey.
I love it. It sounds like a really, really helpful and really practical book.
Very
So yeah,
practical.
look forward to look forward to getting my hands on a
Yeah.
copy of it. How do you think in your work, just to zoom out a little bit, like how do you think about words, like whatever words fit you, whatever words are in your vernacular, but words like calling or passion or vocation, what words apply and how do you define them when it comes to what you do?
So I would say the work that I do is definitely, it's definitely, my calling right now. I
Hmm.
again, I don't commit that this is forever. I don't think it's
Yeah.
necessary to commit to forever. If it is, fantastic. But who knows? Maybe I want to open up a bagel shop one day. I don't know, right?
That's so great. I love it. I love bagels.
And that's okay, right? That's okay. What I do know is, as far as passion, yes, I know I get excited about the work that I do. It's purposeful. I love it when individuals have those aha moments, or when people can really push past their barriers and blocks, especially when it's mindset.
Mm.
So definitely, I'm energized by it. So because I'm energized by it, I know that I'm working in my strengths, right?
Yep.
I know that my passion and what some the things that I do well are intersecting,
Yeah.
and it's great to be in that moment, right
Yeah.
now. So that is fantastic. Is it a lot of work, in terms of my hours? And I mean, yeah, that's the part that people don't want to always talk about. Yes, your own business, yeah,
Yes.
your marketing, your business. I spent 2 hours this morning on the phone with an accountant trying to categorize my QuickBooks. Like, it's a lot, but
Yes.
it's worth it for me.
I love it. I love it. Thank you. Well, it's such a good and just practical answer, which I really love. You're talking just there. You just mentioned mindset, and earlier you talked about a little bit about scarcity, the scarcity mindset, how dangerous. I don't know if dangerous is the right word. Yeah, limiting. Maybe that's a better
Yeah.
way to think of it. It can be. And I'm just curious if you have thoughts for listeners who maybe they want to upgrade their mindset, improve their mindset game, or identify the gaps in their mindset. If there's anything in particular that you would invite people to, or maybe practical um, exercises to help them become more aware of their, of their current mindset and yeah, how to improve their mindset.
So I'm a big believer in I am statements.
Yeah.
I have 10 I am statements that I write out almost every single morning. That's something I do, but it really, these are things that I want to either see play out in my life, or it's also things that I just want to maintain every single day, right? So one of my very first I am statement that I say every single morning is that I am operating at my highest level or vibrating at my highest energy level all day, right? Does that always happen? No, but that's how I want to start my day,
Yeah.
right? I'm,
Yeah.
I'm at my highest vibration. And so, just sometimes just taking that time to either do meditation on those statements or to look at them, anything of that nature, I feel is from a mindset standpoint. And it doesn't have to be 10, maybe it's one. I'm an overachiever, so of course I have 10. But having those I am statements, and I think actually the exercise sometimes of just writing them is really
Yeah.
important, but also
Mm.
reading them, meditating on them, and then
Mm.
having that personal mantra as well. And
Yeah.
so I always tell people, still mind, create your own. It doesn't have to be something, over the top. But my personal mantra, as I shared, it has really come in. I can remember one time I was training for a triathlon, and I was working with a swim coach who wanted me to swim the length of like an Olympic sized pool. And I was like, I don't think I'm there yet. And she's like,
Yeah.
no, do it. And I was like, I can, I will, watch me. I can, I will, watch
Yeah.
me. So
Yeah.
it doesn't, these mantras can come into play at any, point in
Yeah.
life, not just for your career, but also sit sometimes in your thoughts, sit
Mm.
in what is limiting you. And a lot of
Yeah.
times when, especially if I'm working with an individual and we're talking about, what's next, especially as it relates to their career, and they say, yeah, I don't want to do that. And I say to them, is it that you don't want to do it because you're not interested, or because it scares you? If you're not interested, or if it's something that is just, off the table,
Yeah.
or we don't even want to discuss it, no problem. But if you're not doing it because it's scary to you, then I want to dig a little bit deeper. And so
Mm.
sometimes I have to ask myself that question as well. Did I not email that person and ask them to do this for my business, or do this because I wasn't interested in it, or because it scares me because they might reject me, they might not respond, or I might not
Yeah.
get the answer that I want. So sometimes you
Mm.
have to check your own self on, are you, we can tell ourselves easily, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to go there. I don't want to, send that LinkedIn request or whatever it might be. But that's where you have to really kind of check yourself. Is it my mindset that's holding me back, or is it fear?
I love that. That's super, super helpful. Great questions for people to consider. I'm curious for folks who, a lot of people listening to the podcast are thinking about some sort of life change, whether or not they're calling it that yet. Um, but oftentimes they don't know they don't know what to change. They don't know what their next thing is. They're looking for their next thing, and yeah, maybe they just don't know how to move forward. Maybe they feel stuck. But I'm curious if you have any words of encouragement and or practical steps to offer folks that are in those kinds of in between. I don't know what's next spaces.
Yeah, so I would say, one of the things a couple of things. Number one, um, know that it's okay to not always know what's
Mm.
next. And
Yeah.
maybe sometimes it's just what's next for you is just, a month, a year, or whatever. I think it's the idea that we feel like we have to figure out everything long term is what sometimes can feel extremely overwhelming. So
Yeah.
give yourself space to just dream or to think out loud in a short term basis, and then get to the long term piece. So that's one of the things I would say first. Second, I'm a big believer in journaling. I love to do morning pages, which is where you set the timer for maybe 10 minutes and then just let free flow. If I could be doing anything I wanted to do, what would it be? And just don't edit yourself, just like let it come out of
Get it
you.
out.
It doesn't have to
Uh-huh.
make sense, and just let it, like, maybe it's a list, maybe you're writing in detail. I woke up this morning, I went to this job, or I didn't go to this job, or I lived here, or this is
Yeah.
I went to school, or whatever it is. But just allow yourself to like let it out, and then let it sit, and then come back and be like, okay, what can I pull from here and start to add maybe, or start to create a little bit of a framework for what I want my life to look like.
Yep.
And so we don't always allow ourselves to do those types of things, or we're like, oh, I don't have time, but you can journal for 10 minutes. I'm sure everyone
Yes.
can find that 10 minutes to do something like that. And then the other third thing I would say is talk to people. Think about people who are doing stuff that sounds cool, that sounds interesting, that, maybe you want to be a podcaster. Find some podcasters that go and like, what does it mean to be a podcaster? How do you make money? What are the challenges? And so,
Yeah.
expand your circle and just be curious, because you never know where that might lead you as well. I do a lot of public speaking, which I never entertained or never thought about that being a career path. And I had no idea, number one, how much money some of these people make who are, the top
Yeah.
notch speakers. But, now I study them. Like Mel Robbins, I study Mel Robbins. I
Yes.
got to see her speak recently in person. And so I'm like, I'm so curious. Like, I want to, like, I want to get a better sense of what that really looks like, because I want a piece of that as part of my career as well. So
Mm.
that's the other piece about it, is just
Yeah.
be curious and talk to
Yeah.
people.
I love that. And I think even as you're talking to people, I know sometimes, especially if it's friends, right? Telling friends where you're at, like sometimes there can be a lot of shame
Yeah.
around like feeling like I should have it all together. I should have it all figured out. But then what I find is that as people have those conversations, as you let people into your process, they become advocates for you. And then they start thinking about you when they're in another conversation, like, hey, you should go talk to Dan or talk to Arika, and that, like, even just that act of inviting someone in, having that conversation, then like creates, like, it kind of expands your network of what's possible.
100%, Dan. I have a friend who, she worked in a corporate career for a long time, decided that she wanted to do something more creative. And she literally started telling everyone that she knew, this is what, I know you know me is this way, but this is what
Yep.
I'm looking to do next.
Yeah.
And that, just her sharing that, led her to have conversations where they were like, I know someone you can talk to. And
Yes.
she now has had her own talk show on Bravo. She has a radio
Wow.
show on Sirius
Wow.
XM, and it all came, and she always says this, it just came because she's like, I would literally just tell everyone, like, this is what I'm looking to do next. And it may
Yes.
not make sense, but I just want you to know, because you never know who you might be sitting next to on a train one day, that
Yes.
you could say,
That's so
oh my
good.
God, I was just talking to someone, let me introduce you.
Yes.
So don't,
So
and the
good.
more you start saying it out loud and sharing it, the less scarier it starts to be as well.
Yeah, I love that. It's so great. Well, this has been just so fun, Arika. Thank you so much for coming on the show. For folks that want to connect with you or follow along with your work, do you have anything in particular you'd like to invite people to?
Sure. So please definitely go to my website. It's ericapierce.com. If you're interested in the book, I Will Watch Me. You can also access it there, and even download, I believe it's the first maybe 2 or 3 chapters for free. And then also I'm on social media at Arika L. Pierce on Instagram. And for all of my business people out there, you can find me also on LinkedIn.
I love it. Well, thanks so much, and looking forward to staying connected.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Dan. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much, Arika, and thank you, listeners and viewers, for tuning in. You can find links to Arika's work in our show notes at themeaningmovement.com/Arika. That's ARIKA. If you are too often high performers end up being burnt out and running on empty, pulled in multiple directions between all of our responsibilities, the Meaning Movement is here to help you create a clear plan for reclaiming your life, your work, and your relationships. If that sounds good to you, then you are in the right place. Subscribe to this podcast. Get on our email list. You can find the email list at themeaningmovement.com. There's opt-in boxes all over the site, and follow along. I'm dedicated to creating resources to help you get your life back and get back on track. Hit that subscribe button wherever you're watching or listening. If you're on YouTube, give us a thumbs up, leave us a comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts. We'll be back with you in just a few days. Our artwork is by Eleazar Ruiz. Our music is by Tom Roram. Thanks so much. See you soon. There's a big problem that's changing everything about the world as we know it. Carbon and the impact of humans on the earth. We talk about it with words like climate change and global warming. But there's just two really important things that you need to know about it. First, this is an overwhelmingly big problem. So much so that it's likely that you feel as though your choices don't matter in the face of it. Second, that overwhelming feeling that I just mentioned, it's intentional. It was put there by design. The industries that make the biggest environmental impact have a vested interest in you feeling overwhelmed and powerless. They've marketed, lobbied, and schemed to create that feeling in all of us. In short, we've been lied to. But here's the good news. There's a lot you can do to make a difference. And the other good news is that there's still time. The Carbon Almanac is a book and project about these problems and what we can do to solve them. It was created and run by volunteers on the premise that it's not too late, but none of us can fix this problem on our own. We need each other. There are many ways to get involved, but simply learning more is a great start. Here are 3 steps you can take. First, go to thecarbonalmanac.org and sign up for the Daily Difference emails. They give you a short thought and a practical action that you can take alongside thousands of others every day. Second, get the Carbon Almanac book. It's full of facts, articles, graphs, and art. It's beautiful and fun to engage with. It's all footnoted and fact-checked. And importantly, it's made by volunteers whose only agenda is to solve these systemic issues. You can find it wherever books are sold. Finally, since you're listening to a podcast, search for the Carbon Almanac wherever you're listening. You'll find the Carbon Almanac Podcast Network and a few shows featuring expert insight, discussion, inspiration, and ways to take action. There's even a show just for kids. Do what appeals to you. Just do something. There's still time to make a huge difference in the future of the planet, but we can't solve this on our own. Join us.